Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This is Juanma, and I will be your flight attendant today. On behalf of the entire crew, welcome aboard. In today's flight to Abu Dhabi, we'll go over an important business ethics decision while up in the air. Craig, the CEO in Career Transitions Corporation, received a proposal to transform the company's operations into a virtual model. This restructuring would have termination engineers firing people from their headquarters in Omaha instead of in person from their respective offices. As with most business decisions, there is an important ethical dimension to it. To better understand it, it is better to review the underlying ethical decision-making process through a pluralist perspective. If you haven't already done so, please stow your carry-on luggage underneath the seat in front of you in an overhead bin. Please take your seat and fasten your seatbelt. Natalie's initial presentation seems innocuous. What could go wrong with an 85% reduction in traveling costs and more time for employees to spend with their families? Nevertheless, we might experience some turbulence as we discover that there are ethical implications beyond what's on the surface. Recognizing that there is a moral issue is the first step of ethical decision-making process. In this case, we are facing a right versus right dilemma in the form of individual versus community. By this we mean, it is right to fire people through video call, in some cases, as it can increase privacy, improve efficiency in this process, and reduce disruption at the office. But it is also right to fire someone in person, honoring the individual's dignity and providing a safe space to discuss their decision. But wait, how can I know that this is a right versus right situation? I see the logic behind what I say, but could I not argue that this is a right versus wrong situation?
That's a very good question, and exactly what's next in the ethical decision-making process. The second step, making a moral judgment, is difficult. However, by informing our argument with normative ethical theories and the ideas of recognized moral philosophers, we hope to apply 3 ethical tests and show you how Craig's decision was a right versus right dilemma. Sort of. According to deontology, Craig's decision to adopt the online business model expands the rights of the termination officers in the company as it allows them to remain at home for longer periods of time and saves them hours of delays in travel. The company too has a duty to its shareholders to economize on costs, which would greatly benefit from this shift. Despite this, the rights of employees who are being terminated are violated by removing the comfort of companionship and the respect of an in-person interaction for a termination of employment. Most of the individuals who are fired are middle-range managers, and an online termination does not reflect their dedication to their companies. There is a duty to not capitalize on any individual's rights or use people as a means to an end. Craig's decision fails to account for these human elements and needs, and as a result, the choice fails the categorical imperative of putting humans first, because it prioritizes company costs and uses the client's employees as a means to achieve the goal of material efficiency. According to utilitarianism, value is created for the shareholders of CTC, as has been said previously, in terms of economic gain and optimization of resources. Value is created for the termination officers as well, because being away from home for 250 days a year can incur non-economic costs on each individual, such as a strain on their personal relationships. The counter of this would be employees who love their job online less than they do when they're traveling, such as Ryan Bingaman. The consequentialist test also considers their efficiency and the increased number of employees that Craig's decision will allow them to fire as a gain. The client companies will also have increased benefit as the services of the termination company will be more efficient, and this could be reflected in the cost of the service provided. However, it could go both ways, because if the client perceives the termination quality as lower, they may terminate their contract with CTC and choose other companies, which would lead to long-term negative consequences for CTC. According to this quantification, there is a significant destruction of value for the employees who are being fired since the overall quality of the terminations is lower, which results in less support for each individual and is a factor not considered in Craig's decision. The emotional strain could be worse and can lead to consequences such as legal action against the company or individual self-harm. For this, virtual proceedings can be efficient and resource effective, but the considerations of the harm they do in a setting like firing employees is paramount. A rule utilitarian would apply this potential harm to a greater scope, perhaps making a rule like removing the human component of a company process for the purpose of efficiency can negatively impact the role of employees in a firm. According to virtue ethics, the values of the company overall may be compromised by Craig's decision. The integrity test is not necessarily met by firing employees through a way that can create undesired distance. To be virtuous, it is important to do what is honorable and provide a service that fulfills its promise to the fullest. With this decision to simplify the service, Craig's decision brands the company as a fast and fired solution, which does not go hand in hand with the values that are imperative to assisting committed individuals who are being fired, and in the case of this context, for consequences that are related to the market rather than their own actions. As the 3 ethical tests demonstrate, firing virtually does not necessarily imply an unethical decision. Nevertheless, as done by CTC in the movie, it is unethical as indicated by the outcome of a deontological, utilitarian, and virtue ethics analysis.
The next step in the decision-making process are establishing moral intent and engaging in moral behavior. Discussing intent requires some assumptions about the Craig, CEO of CTC, was thinking. Nevertheless, we can identify individual and situational factors that could have impacted his moral intent and moral action. Here, we will employ descriptive ethical theories. Some individual factors that we believe could have an impact in Craig's decision are the lack of moral imagination or his lack of ability to grasp the extent of distress a virtual firing can have on employees and Terminator engineers. Perhaps also a low locus of control could also play a role if he was to believe that the company's role did not really influence the impact of the firing. That is, they would be fired either way, we can't control the event. Craig rationalizes his decision by using denial of victim and denial of injury. When the plan fails, it's the new worker or Natalie's fault as she came up with the plan, and Craig is convinced that firing people online would not physically harm anyone, and there is no difference of doing it in person or online. 3 situational factors have influenced Craig's decision. First, moral framing. Craig is welcoming Natalie's new business plan as she phrases it as a way to transform expensive and inefficient strategy, and CTC workers can come home, instead of firing committed employees online. Hierarchical work roles has impacted Craig's decision as he is a boss of CTC and he must consider most profitable way of his business. Lastly, national context also influenced Craig's decision as the United States culture generally emphasizes efficiency, capitalism, and workers' rights. Craig was encouraged to consider a new business strategy by Natalie to increase the company's profit by saving traveling costs and protecting employees' freedom to spend their time after work with their families.
As a CEO, Craig has a fiduciary duty to the company. And in fact, approving the use of online layoffs would actually bring large monetary benefits to its shareholders. The sizable costs incurred from flights, hotels, and transportation would be brought to zero, which is a massive financial help for CTC. Plus, the time consumed per layoff is greatly reduced, leaving CTC's layoff officers not only more time for more clients, but also more space to enjoy their families and free time in Omaha. But is this move considering the well-being of all stakeholders? While the burden of in-person layoffs is removed from CTC, a load of added stress and uncertainty is placed on the terminated employees. Virtual communications would make the firing process less personal and empathetic, which Ryan Bingham himself argues could lead to more trauma than in-person layoffs. Plus, virtual operations could potentially ruin the enjoyment of working for CTC. As Ryan heavily discusses, he enjoys both traveling and connecting with his clients. Online calls essentially remove the elements he enjoys the most from his job, which likely affected his decision to join the company in the first place. Generalizing this possibility to all CTC employees, the virtual system could negatively impact CTC's employees and ruin its cohesion. Let's just say, Ryan will be much less happy on Zoom than he would be in business class. We can also draw an interesting comparison between the recent rise in AI automation and CTC's virtual layoffs. Following the EU's guidelines on trustworthy AI, we can test whether this virtual system agrees with the ethical principles we try to apply to rising technologies in our present. Unfortunately, we would realize that removing the autonomy to be creative from CTC's experts, failing to prevent emotional harm to laid-off employees, the unfair treatment between employees laid off in person versus online, and the lack of transparency to laid-off employees about being fired online hinted this system not being in line with our ethical principles.
As it can be seen, the situation presents a complex equilibrium between the optimization of resources and the lifestyle of the termination officers at CTC and the delicate nature of the job that is being performed. Despite the in-person component not being an occupational qualification, virtuality fails to account for the ramifications of consequences for the company, the employees, and the client's employees. We believe that the best solution is to create a hybrid approach that maintains the standards of professionalism, privacy, and personalization that each employee that is being fired deserves while economizing resources for the company. and the shareholders by extension. In this hybrid model, a more efficient organization of travels would ensure that notifications are handled in clusters rather than scattered all over the country. Because, for this case, most of the layoffs occur en masse, it would be more efficient to travel to one company headquarters at a time. In addition, virtual terminations could take place only when the appropriate measures are taken. We proposed the establishment of personalized counseling services that client companies would also acquire to follow up on the employee's next step. Ensuring that the outplacement services are matched with the termination meetings will make the process more humane.